water. It's a team from Toronto, Canada. We, the North, are now we, the champions.
What is going on, Raptors Nation? What is going on? It is Luca here, back with the Raptors Nation podcast on this March 27th. Hope you're all doing well. In today's show, I want to talk about the current state of the Raptors and really the Raptors knowing their fate. The Toronto Raptors, their fate became a lot clearer after their most recent win against the Brooklyn Nets. It was a very important tankathon game, and the Raptors, they haven't been quite good at this whole tanking thing. And as a result, they pretty much know where they stand with 9 games left in the regular season. So I'm going to talk to you about the Raptors' fate, what to expect, all that good stuff. Do me a solid, smash the like on the video, smash the subscribe button for more pods just like this. This pod coming to you every single Thursday. And go follow me on X at Luca Rosano 3. So the Raptors, they have been doing quite a bit of winning as of late, more so than the teams who they trail in the tankathon. And they headed into Wednesday night's matchup against the Nets in a must-lose situation if they wanted any hope of potentially moving on up in the tank race. However, the Raptors simply too good to bottom out against the Nets. Didn't help that they played RJ and Scotty, and the Raptors, they got their biggest win of the season. I mean, this was a no doubt about them contest. You knew right from the jump the Raptors were going to win this game, literally getting out to that 32-18 first quarter lead. 116-86 the final. As I mentioned, Barnes, he played 28 minutes. Barrett, 28 minutes. Both contributing with 15 apiece. But the big story, Orlando Robinson, 23 points, 12 rebounds in 24 minutes of action. He really dominated this matchup. Mobo had 16 and 24. Walter had 11. And Abaji had 12. So you compare that to what the Nets had in this game. I mean, they were just simply unmatched. And the Raptors, they were not going to lose this game. If you are part of Team Tank, it's a bad win. It really is, because it virtually eliminates the Raptors from now moving on up of getting that 5th best lottery odds. I know there's still time, but the Raptors are virtually now locked into the 7 best lottery odds, because you look at where they stand in the tankathon. They're now a full 3 games back of both the Nets and the 76ers. And with the way those teams are going, Sixers have lost 6 in a row, 1-9 in the last 10. Brooklyn has lost 5 in a row, 2-8 in their last 10. I don't think those teams are even going to win a game down the stretch of the season. It's looking likely the Raptors are not going to catch them, and they're going to be locked into the number 7 odds. And in terms of maybe the teams behind them catching up to them, I would say it's highly unlikely. I mean, Miami, they're 5.5 games back of the Raptors in the reverse standings. And if they surpass the Raptors are all of a sudden in a play-in spot. And then San Antonio, I think, is more likely to be worried about, just because they do have a tough schedule. They're clearly trying to tank, but the Raptors are 6 clear of San Antonio, and then even Portland. With 9 games left, it would literally take the Raptors having to win out, go 9-0, and then those teams do a lot of losing. So I don't think that's it's definitely in the realm of possibilities, but I don't think that's likely. I mean, that would be horrible if something like that were to happen. So basically, what I'm trying to say here, the Raptors are locked into the 7 best lottery odds. And you look at it, it was always going to be tough, for this Raptors team to tank with their schedule being as easy as it was. But it almost felt like the Raptors weren't willing to enter that next level of tanking. It feels like they weren't willing to get ugly with it. And that's the part that upsets me, because they knew what the season was going to be about since the trade deadline. When they made the trade for Brandon Ingram, management knew that the rest of the season was going to be about losing. The rest of the season was going to be about putting this team in the best position draft lottery wise. And they still managed to fumble it. And what I mean about not willing to enter that next level of tanking is the Raptors tried to have their cake and eat it too. They played their starters way too much. Like, you've been seeing some ugly, absolutely ugly tanking from the parts of the Jazz, this Nets team, the 76ers. The 76ers have benched everybody. If the Raptors were really serious about this tanking thing, they should have done that same thing. You know, maybe it's pride, maybe it's them being too good. It's probably a combination of a lot of things, but for the Raptors not to have shut down their starters at this point, clearly them interchanging who goes and who sits out hasn't been enough, because whenever you got RJ and Scotty out there, and then in the next game you got Pirtle and Quickly, that's enough to beat these teams, especially when Scotty and Barrett, they give you 30 combined in a game like this. And look, you probably still end up winning this game with Scotty and Barrett sideline, but at least it helps you a bit to have those guys not play. So the point is, like, the Raptors, they weren't willing to go that extra mile. They weren't willing to shut down starters. And what I really think hurt this team was the whole Scotty Barnes situation. Because if this team was serious about tanking, remember, they had the leg up over the likes of the Nets and the 76ers. The 76ers only started tanking recently. The Raptors had the 5th best lottery odds for quite a bit of time before they went on their winning ways. They wouldn't have played their starters, and they wouldn't have played Scotty Barnes as much as they've been playing him. And what really screwed this team up was the whole all-NBA stipulation. And what sucks about that is Scotty Barnes not going to make All-NBA. He never was going to make All-NBA. It was always going to be a long shot. And right now, I can confidently say he's not making All-NBA. But the Raptors, they weren't going to be the ones to eliminate him from that 65-game minimum stipulation. That's what screwed this team up. If this is any other season where the contract doesn't have that stipulation of if he makes All-NBA, he gets the payday bonus, I would have imagined the Raptors would have sat him out. But because there was that lingering, the Raptors weren't going to be the ones to eliminate him from that by purposely sitting him out. And I think that's what really messed up this team. Because if they didn't have that, you could have sat Barnes out, and then that would have been a domino effect of sending these guys out, because there's no reason why the Raptors should be playing any of their starters. You can say they're going to investigate the Raptors, penalize them. What did the Jazz get fined? $100K? Hell, pay the $100K. But the Jazz are probably going to get Cooper Flag, or they got a good chance of getting Cooper Flag. They were never going to eliminate a draft pick. They can't do that. So it's like the Raptors almost wanted to save their reputation. Again, too prideful. They wanted to play their guys, but not so much. But anytime you get a situation where the Raptors were playing their starters, especially for a few minutes in the fourth quarter, at that point, I knew this team was unserious about truly tanking, because we've seen tanking done correctly. What we've seen from this Toronto Raptors team is not how you tank correctly. This is a team that is like, they want to still go out there and win games, and then they hope they lose. Like, that's not how you tank. You tank by going out there with your worst lineup, benching your starters, and not having a hope that your team's going to mess up. You put the worst product out there on the court. I'm talking from a tanking perspective. Obviously, we're going to get into the narratives. Oh, that goes against the game and the fans and all that. We're just talking strictly tanking here. The Raptors have not done a good job when it comes to tanking. They didn't get to that low of low levels. And it potentially cost them. I'm not saying the Raptors are not going to get a top pick now, because that's untrue. Of course, they can get lucky. And the silver lining here is the last time the Raptors did have the 7th best odds was back in that 2021 draft. And guess what? They jumped up to number 4 to draft Scotty Barnes. So if you actually look at the history, the last 6 seasons, I think it is, of the 7th best lottery odds, it's got a pretty good track record. Not the last 2 years, because I think the last 2 years, last year, the team fell 2 spots. The year before that, the team stayed the same. But then for like 4 years in a row, teams jumped from 7 and up. And most notably in 2019, the Pelicans. They had the 7th best odds, and they moved up to number 1 to draft Zion. So all hope is not lost. But now the Raptors are going to have to hope and pray that the draft lottery gods are on their side, because they're virtually locked into the 7th best odds. And unless they get some luck, that means the Raptors are going to be picking number 7 or worse. And that's unfortunate. If that ends up being the case and the Raptors have the 7th pick, I'm not saying you still can't get a good player, but I think considering where this team was at, what their intentions were, the fact that they didn't orchestrate a proper tanking strategy, knowing what their intention was all along, that in itself would be a big disappointment. So I'm not going to rip this team a new one in that sense until the draft lottery happens, because if the draft lottery happens and the Raptors move on up, they get some luck, all is saved. But if this team ends up getting 7 or worse, especially when you had a leg up on things, yeah, you can say they're too good. They got these young guys who are hungry, but there was a way of doing this. And the Raptors, they weren't willing to go that extra mile with it. That's the bottom line. They did not orchestrate the same type of tank as some of these other teams. You can criticize it all you want, but the 76ers, they put forth a tanking strategy that is at least going to give them a good chance now to keep their pick. You had to be willing to go to those levels, and the Raptors simply weren't. Again, they wanted to player develop, have their starters still play, and as a result, they're kind of in that mediocrity, that middle ground of 7, literally dead smack in the middle of the draft lottery, unless they get some luck on their side. So again, not all hope is lost, but it's disappointing because I went into this thing hoping the Raptors were going to at least get a top 5 pick. If they don't, it is going to be disappointing. Look, you can still end up getting a good player, but you're not getting the changing talent at number 7. And, for people saying Maluak, he might not even be there at number 7. With the way he's going, he might be a number 6, number 5 pick. I always looked at this as a draft that you needed to get into that top 5 to have a chance at a game-changing talent. Maybe I'm wrong, but that's just my feeling that, 7 to 10, you're going to get a good player, good role player, but now you're not really having that excitement of, oh my goodness, we're going to get a player who's really going to be a big changing talent on this team. And maybe this is one of our cornerstone pieces. Now you're going to have to ask the guys you have now to take their games to the next level if you do want to compete going into next season. BI's got to be healthy, look like an all-star. Scotty Barnes, he's going to have to play more so like the Scotty we saw last year, those all-star numbers. Now I'm not going to get too critical of him, but he's been taking a lot of shots. He's had a lot of iffy games. And of course, this team is tanking, I guess. So, Barnes not going to play his best. I guess you can use that as an excuse for him, but, he's going to have to return to all-star 4, maybe enter another level. He has to, right? Because those are going to be the top 2 players on this team now. And then RJ and Quickly, they're going to now have to be asked of doing a lot. Because I always thought this team, best case, you had Brandon Ingram, you had Scotty Barnes, but then you're going to add a top 5 talent. And then I looked at it where if you don't add a top 5 talent, you're going to need more of those guys I just mentioned, the current guys, to really take their game to that next level. And I don't think, unless you get lucky, you're not going to get a guy at 7 who's going to potentially become a star. That could have been the case in the top 5, definitely in the top 3. But again, if the Raptors don't get luck, they're not going to get into that top 3. So yeah, I mean, look, there was a blueprint. The Raptors knew their plan. They went about it in a certain way, and it didn't work out. So at this point, that's it. I've accepted the fate. A lot of fans have accepted the fate. The Raptors, hopefully they can clinch this 7th best odds sooner rather than later, because I don't want the possibility of them falling even more and maybe the Spurs catch them or the Blazers. So 7th best odds, that's what it is. No point debating about it more, talking about it more, because that is the Raptors' fate. That is the reality. And now, they're going to go into the draft lottery. Let's just say they end with the 7th worst record. They're going to have a 31.9% chance of getting to the top 4. So still got, better than a 30% chance. They've done it before. You hang your hat on that. And then they have a 7.5% chance of the number 1 overall pick. But you look at it, the team that finishes with the 5th worst record, and right now it's going to be a dogfight, tank off between Philadelphia and Brooklyn. they're going to have a 39.9% chance to get into the top 4 and then a 9.8% chance to get the number 1 overall pick. So obviously better percentages than the Raptors. And then the bottom 4 is pretty much locked in at this point. Actually, you know what? With the way Philadelphia is going, they could even pass New Orleans. They're 3 back of New Orleans in the reverse standings. But in terms of the Raptors, yeah, they're pretty much locked into the 7 best odds. I think you could worry about the Spurs. That is, if the Raptors just reel off a bunch of wins here. Remember, they're only playing one team in their last 9 that's above 500, and that's the Detroit Pistons. And the Spurs, I know they have a tough schedule. So those are the teams. But you hope a team like Chicago beats the Raptors, because I know they play the Bulls too. So yeah, that's basically where the Raptors are at. And then, we're going to get into who they're going to draft and all that as we get closer to the draft. And obviously, once we know officially where the Raptors are picking from, it's going to give us a better idea of like who to zero in on. But I did drop a piece on my personal channel looking at some potential options. Yakachunas, I think, is going to be in the top 5, so he's out of that. I'm talking about if the Raptors stay at 7. Malawak, I think, is going to be a reach. But maybe he's there. Queen, I like a lot too. I think he's really risen his stock with March Madness, of course, hitting the game winner. There's some other guys as well. But like I said, once we know where the Raptors are at, then we can see who they're going to take. But of course, when you just look at team needs, one thing that is clear as day is a center. And really, it's unfortunate. Like, let's props to Orlando Robinson. I love that he's dominating, but I would have loved to see Ulrich Chomsky get all these reps, play as well as Orlando Robinson has been, because he's kind of like the long-term future, the project center, if you will. But after Jakob Poeltl, there is a big gap on this team with their front court depth. They're looking for that backup center for Poeltl next season and their center of the future to go alongside with Ulrich Chomsky as kind of that further away prospect. So that's definitely going to be a team need. There's some guards who have been linked to the Raptors, just some guys who can space the floor and shoot it well. Jace Richardson is a name that comes to mind, son of former NBA star Jason Richardson. I know Jace, he had a tough game in his last March Madness tournament outing, but that's a guy who can shoot it. You also have Johnson from Texas. That's a guy who can space the floor, who could potentially be available at that spot. So there are some potential guys who the Raptors could still salvage their draft with, some good players. Trades Johnson, he is that type of offensive spark plug that could be useful on this team. Of course, looking for that guy to maybe be another piece from off the bench, or even a guy who can step in and maybe be a starter on this team. Of course, RJ Barrett's future is kind of up in the air, or at least it seems like it is. Grady Dick, he's a guy who we haven't seen in a while, but right now, if you go into next season with this current team, you would think he's coming from off the bench and RJ is at least going to start to begin the season. So which direction do the Raptors go with their pick? I would bet it would be center, but if not, like I said, there are a couple of guys who they can go with who can space the floor and shoot, Richardson and Johnson being a couple. But yeah, I mean, this is basically where the Raptors find themselves, guys. Unless they get luck, they're not going to be able to get into that top 5, and they're going to have to really put their draft caps on and try to find the gem in that 7 range. And that's if the Raptors don't fall, because of course that is a possibility too. It happened just last year. I forgot the team that was 7, but they did fall to number 9. So that would be the worst case scenario. And then you'll definitely hear from me if that happens. But yeah, I mean, I think the remainder of the season, it's as follows. Like, don't mess it up anymore. Don't give San Antonio a chance to potentially pass you. Again, it would be very difficult. There's 9 games left. Heat are 5.5 back. San Antonio 6 back. So it would truly take something absurd for the Raptors to all of a sudden be in a playing spot, or for the Spurs to pass them. Like I said, they would have to win out or close to it, and then those teams would have to lose out or close to it. But it is a possibility. But there's 9 games left, and you look at the Raptors' remaining schedule, they're probably going to win, I would say, like 7 of these next 9, or at least 6. The Hornets will probably be Sixers. They're going to be Bulls. I would say they'll lose. I think they'll beat Portland. this time around because the game's going to be in Toronto. We'll say they lose against the Pistons. They'll beat the Nets. They'll beat the Hornets. They'll probably beat the Mavs, and they'll beat the Spurs. So that's 2 wins. That's 2 losses over this team's final 9 games. So I could see the Raptors go 7-2. And with that, if San Antonio does a bunch of losing, that would make things interesting. So hopefully the Raptors go on like a 3-game losing streak right now. So it just solidifies the 7 best lottery odds because you don't even want to entertain them potentially falling when it comes to the draft lottery race. But overall, that's where the Raptors are. Continue to see them do this type of approach. I don't think they're going to shut down starters. They haven't done it up until this point. It'd be funny if they start doing it now. It's like you should have done it sooner, but I don't think that's going to be the case. You're going to keep seeing interchanges between Scotty, RJ, IQ, Jakob Poeltl, and don't expect to see Brandon Ingram again. At this point, it seems like we're going to see Brandon Ingram make his Raptors debut first game of next season, and I'm A-okay with that. So let me know your thoughts, Raptors fans. How you feeling? Are you disappointed that the Raptors weren't able to do more losing, and now they find themselves where they find themselves? And who are some of the draft prospects you got on your radar this early on if the Raptors do indeed get the 7th pick in the 2025 NBA draft? Let me know your thoughts, guys. Drop a like on the video, smash the subscribe button for more, and go and follow me on X at Luca Rosano 3. And be sure to leave us a 5-star review. You can find this podcast wherever you get your favorite podcasts, Apple, iTunes, and Spotify. That is it for me. It's Luke signing off. Thanks so much for watching. I will catch you all again in the next one.